But before I started the record label and before I sort of put those expectations to an artist of like, you know, we're putting out this music and what are we going to do together, I often would just make a record or an EP with somebody and be like, here you go. And then once you give the product to the artist and they have to do their job of like putting it out into the world, suddenly there was like a moment of disconnect. And so
I know that experience. Welcome to Recording Studio Rockstars. I'm Lid Shaw, and this is the podcast created to help you become a rock star of the recording studio. Today's episode of Recording Studio Rockstars is sponsored by Roswell Pro Audio, maker of handcrafted microphones in California. Inspired design and impeccable attention to detail will help you capture a gorgeous vintage sound without the vintage price tag. Check out their beautiful line of microphones at roswellproaudio.com. You may already know that using true analog gear is one of the best ways to create a great record. Yet increasingly, we live in a digital world, recording and mixing inside the computer. So what if you could have the best of both worlds? Tegeler Audio Manufaktur is bridging the analog-digital divide by creating high-end analog gear like the Schwerkraftmaschine compressor and the Raumzeitmaschine reverb, whose knobs you can control remotely using a plugin in your DAW. Or their many analog units like the Cream bus compressor with mastering EQ, or the Veritube recording channel that let you save your settings using a custom recall sheet plugin, offering a complete line of pro audio gear from compressors to EQs to reverbs and beyond. Now you can get a pro analog sound while benefiting from the power of digital. Let your DAW help you move your knobs so that your music can move you. Click the link in the show notes to learn more about Tegeler Audio Manufaktur. Hey Rockstars, it's your host Lid Shaw, and welcome to Recording Studio Rockstars, bringing you into the studio to learn from recording professionals so that you can make your best record ever and be a rock star of the studio yourself. My guest today is Femke Weidema, a musician, producer, songwriter, and composer for film and TV, a Dutch native starting out at Berklee College of Music. She's also spent time in LA working at Hans Zimmer's prestigious remote control studios in Los Angeles, won the ASCAP Harold Adamson Award, studied with Lin Manual Miranda at Chicago's Northwestern University with the Johnny Mercer Foundation, and worked for Richard Gibbs and Don Grusin. As a musician, she sang with Blink-182's Mark Hoppus on the soundtrack for Fired Up, played accordion on several indie movies. That's cool.
Thanks.
Played guitar and programmed on ABC's 10 Things I Hate About You, and scored a season of Disney's Binny und der Geist. I don't know if I'm saying that right.
That's great.
She was also recently the subject of the Dutch documentary series Don't Dream, Do, about her success as a producer in Nashville. Femke has a studio at Liz Rose Music, a publisher in Nashville she works with closely for all her country material, and has recently gotten her cuts on Seth Enos with Sony and others. Her productions are gaining international attention with a UK viral chart mention for Four Walls on SYPS and BBC One, and her goal is to create a global hub here in Nashville, working with artists from Thailand, China, Canada, and the UK, Germany, and Scotland that either come here to work with her or she goes to them with a portable studio. We're going to have questions about that for sure.
Cool.
So in 2017, she decided to create a platform for the artists she thinks the world needs to hear. And this is how LV Music was born in partnership with Tone Tree Music. Please welcome Femke Weidema to Recording Studio Rockstars. Femke, are you ready to rock?
Yes, I'm ready.
Sweet. LV Music. Do you actually just pronounce it love?
Yeah, that's what it came from. Yeah.
All right, cool.
Yeah.
I like that. Well, hopefully I didn't stumble too much on that intro.
No, that was great.
That's what edits are for, right? Tell us more about who you are. I mean, that's a brief introduction, but tell us in your own words who you are and how you got here.
Well, so I'm Dutch. I started as a classical accordion player. So I studied classical accordion in Europe, in Holland. And while I was playing in this tango orchestra, we did a sort of a little album in the studio, which was my first time in the studio. And that's when I just fell in love with studio stuff. I wanted to be the person behind the window. I wanted to be the person pushing the buttons. And so I kind of hang my accordion in the trees and started producing. And
I like that image, hanging your accordion in the trees.
Now, secretly, I'm still playing it, so it's not dead.
Are you waiting for a call from Weird Al to join the band?
That would be pretty cool.
That would be pretty cool.
That'd be awesome. Yeah. So I stopped the accordion for a little while, started producing, writing songs, and then I just Googled best songwriting education, and then Berklee College of Music came up. I worked really hard for a year collecting money and scholarships, went to Berklee, went to LA. I mean, it's maybe like, I don't know how detailed I should be, but it's basically
you've been everywhere for a little while.
Everywhere, yes.
Yeah. So you were in Berklee for a while, you were in LA for a while,
yes.
You were in Chicago for a while.
Yeah, for just a summer, and now I'm in Nashville. And so here from Nashville, I've been traveling the last couple of years, just everywhere around the world, just finding artists, meeting producers, creating collaborations in any way, shape, or form.
Well, that sounds pretty exciting. That sounds like kind of ideal.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. I love it. Yeah.
It's fun to work with people, creating music. It's fun to travel and do that.
Yes.
I think, many people might be familiar with the idea of touring as a band where you're traveling to play shows, but I don't know how many of us are familiar with the idea of touring to just simply co-write and create productions with people. And that sounds pretty fun to do.
Yeah, it's been a great ride. Yeah.
All right. So you were studying music, classically trained accordionist. That's super cool. I love the accordion. I'm embarrassed to say that I sold off my accordion.
No.
I had a, what was it called? It was the Cordovox.
Oh,
the one that was like a combination synthesizer.
Yeah.
I didn't have the amp, but I had the accordion, and it was heavy. It was insanely heavy. It was like a backbreaker. Are you just incredibly strong?
No. The thing that's interesting though, when I studied accordion, there was this point in time when because it's a really serious instrument in Europe, and I had a Russian teacher, and he would come from Russia like once a month, and I would have this like serious lesson. It was very intense, and I would have to go to Italy, to the Pigini factory, which is an accordion maker, where they measure the distance from your knees to your chin.
Wow.
And they make the accordion for you.
Perfectly. Wow.
And those accordions are incredibly heavy. Because it's like a little child, and it's kind of like an organ, a portable organ. And at that point, when I had to make that choice, like, am I going to do this measuring thing, go to Italy and get this thing made? That's when I went into the studio and started thinking like, maybe I want to work in the studio.
With, computers and stuff.
So I never had the accordion made.
What an interesting story. So my brother is a great pianist and keyboardist, and he actually did get an accordion too. And one trip that he and I are very proud of many years ago, 20 years ago at this point, we decided to take my banjo and his accordion, and we went to France, and we busked for a couple of weeks in Paris.
Wow, that's super
and
cool.
So we just spent every day. We went to the park and learned some songs. He had studied some Gus Viseur songs. I don't know if you know him as French accordionist. And we learned some different things, and then we would take it to the metro and go play until we got busted. we got not really arrested, but we got like hauled off by the cops, and they closed us in a closet, a broom closet, and then put us in there and locked us in there with there was like some guy from Eastern Europe who was just dejected looking, sitting on his accordion case. And
really?
He had gotten in trouble too. Apparently you have to be licensed and have a permit to play in the Paris metro to do busking. And so we did not.
Wow.
And then they took us out to the police truck and, gave us our paperwork, and then they finally let us go. And I never paid my ticket. Sorry, France. Sorry, Paris.
Maybe you shouldn't go back.
Yeah, I know. I'm trying to think if I ever did go back. I don't think I've been back yet.
Wow.
But so that was sort of I love the accordion. I'm a big fan of it. I don't know how many people know that Weird Al started on accordion. I mean, I don't know if his more popular productions these days have any accordion on them anymore. Do they?
I don't think so. No.
Yeah. So you might not know that, rock stars. So that's how I refer to all our listeners. They're the rock stars. You can say hi to the rock stars right now.
Hi, rock stars.
All right, cool. All right. So groovy. So then you went out to LA. You saw studios and started looking at that life. What did a studio look like to you at that point? Was it big consoles and tape machines, or was it, Apple Logic and a great computer and programming with virtual instruments?
Well, there was my studio at home, and then there was the studios. Like I went to lots of great like studios in LA, like the Village, or there's some phenomenal places. But the places where I worked was with the composers, and that's most of the time was more of like a personal setup. So it wasn't really with all the gears; it was just what they needed.
Right.
But it was always phenomenal. Like Richard Gibbs had a place called the Woodshed. It was in Malibu, right by the ocean, and he had a movable desk, so he could move the desk anywhere in the room. And then we had panels where we could move them around in the control room and create any option for a room. So we could create a vocal booth with the walls, or we could create a big enough space for a band and separate the desk and the computer from it. So it was like this really interesting sort of amazing studio where you could do anything you wanted to do.
And how did the walls sound? I mean, did it sound pretty good when you sort of made a vocal booth out of it? It
sounded great. It was like, I don't know, it was double doors, just pretty heavy double doors. So it's kind of like an actual wall.
And it would all connect together and you kind of create a space.
Yeah. It was very cool.
Yeah, that's pretty remarkable. And I think sometimes we forget that there is that choice too for a recording studio. It doesn't have to be dedicated rooms. Mm-hmm. If you do have a really big space, you can actually just create great big quality gobos or walls or whatever. Josh Harris was on the podcast, his studio up in St. Louis. He has something called an attack wall that he showed me, which are these tubes, and you can set them up, and he put them in, and his speakers are in there, and it's his control room. And it sounds great. I mean, I remember sitting and listening in front of those, and I was like, holy crap, this sounds fantastic. So that's always something to be reminded of, that, you can kind of create a space out of, that's flexible like that.
Yeah. Yeah. And that studio also kind of went against everything I thought a studio was, because most of the time a studio to me was like a dark room, with like no windows, all that stuff. And this had a giant wall of windows looking out over the ocean, like everything you think. And then the speakers were sometimes facing it, like everything you think that shouldn't happen. It was more created around the creation process than it was created around like the perfect studio idea. But then they kind of combined that. So there was the idea of the perfect studio. So it was possible to have that, but then also the perfect creation environment to make the best, to feel the most creative and make the best product possible around it. So yeah, that was a great place.
That's cool. I like that. All right. So then you also worked with Hans Zimmer, right?
Yes. Well, I worked at his studio called Remote Control, and with one of his composers called Michael Levine. So I worked with Michael most of the time. And Michael had more of a traditional studio, like a dark room, a room for the computer stuff and the gear, the noisy stuff, and then a small booth. And then I was in a side room, sort of the assistant room, kind of making sure I would be around for whatever emergency or any, like, I also would like help with writing out the parts for the musicians. And it wasn't just like studio assisting. It was pretty much kind of everything, or like, here's a piano melody, turn it into an orchestration or turn it into a part. Here's a commercial, work out this commercial, play all the instruments. So it was kind of everything all at once.
That's pretty wild. So what does that feel like when somebody gives you a melody and you have to orchestrate it? Break it down for us a little bit more. For those of us who didn't go to school for this, somebody, if I sang you like, na, 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 could you turn that into a whole orchestrated thing?
Yeah. Yeah. I love that stuff. Like, it's kind of like doing math, like putting numbers together, making parts fit, and knowing the ranges of the instruments, knowing what they can and can't play. And then, like, in my mind, music
because you want them to be played by the real instruments and a real orchestra.
Yeah. It has to be like, the difference between arranging a string part on a piano and arranging a string part on individual. There's a difference between arranging vertically and horizontally. I think you should arrange horizontally, where each part is like a melody that you combine with another melody and another melody, and then it all becomes an arrangement. Instead of on the piano, a lot of people just play left and right hand at the same time, and becomes like it sounds really big, but it doesn't have the depth of an arrangement where you really think in melody lines.
Right.
So
right.
I
It
love
just looks
that
like
kind of
chords.
stuff.
It looks like voicings of chords. But an orchestra is far more flexible than that because it's not stuck on two hands.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's so much more possible. So I love when somebody gives me a melody and says, do whatever you want to do. And there's like a specific, like it has to be in this style, or this is the key that we're working in. So it can be super busy because there's dialogue. So you work with the barriers that you have, but there's still so much possible within those barriers.
Okay. So what would be some tools that you would use to start arranging with and working that out?
Some great strings.
You mean like a string sample?
Yeah.
And what about the DAW? What DAW would you be using?
Logic has been my main friend.
All right, cool.
Through all of this. Yeah, I love Logic. And then at first, so what I used to do, I used like the samples inside of Logic just to go really quick. So I can like get my mind in the computer. So whatever I hear in my head kind of goes out really fast and I don't lose it. But then getting a great string sample and making it sound realistic, and writing how the violin plays the bow on the strings, like it's never like a constant velocity. It's like you sort of write that in, and so certain samples are better at that than others. Kind of finding those things that's important too.
Did you ever use any of the Spitfire samples?
I did. I love Spitfire. Yeah, those are great.
I actually have a wonderful library, Bernard Herrmann, I think it is. And I'm still trying to figure out how to install it.
Because it's huge, right?
It's gigantic. It's massive. And it uses, sorry, I didn't prepare for this, so this is off the top of my head, but it uses Contact Player, and I still can't understand where the samples go and how to get that to go. So maybe I'll have to have a separate chat with you.
Yeah, I'll show you.
Okay, so, all right, so you start with, I like that, you're in Logic, you start with something really simple so that you can get your idea quickly.
Yeah.
And then when you're using, what would a simple plugin be for getting your idea quickly?
Just like the regular Logic sounds, because, I just to get all the melodies out of my head, I just need to make sure I just get them all in separate tracks.
Let's just say it was strings. Which one does Logic have for strings? Is there a name of one? Do you want to talk about?
No,
I'm just putting you on the spot here.
Well, it's like when you go to I don't know what it's like, to the left window, and you can just click on orchestral and then strings, and you can just do like legato strings or like whatever.
Right, you don't even have to pick your plug-in.
I just go straight into whatever the fastest
thing about Logic
is. Yeah.
All right, so then you can figure out what your voicings are, and you can decide if something's working together harmonically.
Yeah.
And then you break it down. Oh, that's cool. All right. What questions do I not know to ask you about arranging? What do we need to know about? Like, where do you take it from there?
Well, I do have a philosophy where I combine arranging and production. So I don't know if you're familiar with Ravel.
I know the name.
The composer.
Does that count?
Yeah. So since I draw a lot of my inspiration from the classical world, since that's what I grew up in as a accordion
Most
player.
of my composing is unravel, like unravel. Sorry.
That's a good one.
All right, thanks.
So
you're very kind.
Thank you. So what happens, like with Ravel, the way he treated, like Ravel was the first composer who would combine instruments together into a way where it wouldn't sound like anything. So for instance, he would combine like an oboe with a flute in a different octave, and they would play the exact same part, and therefore it sounded like
that's
a whole new
commonplace
thing.
now.
Yeah, but at the time, Ravel was kind of notorious for people would go to his concerts and think there would be these new instruments that they'd never heard of because the arrangements created sounds.
That's great.
So in my mind, that's what the arrangement does in the production. So for me, production is creating sounds and combining them in a way where it becomes something so unique. People are like, what is that thing? Like, what is that sound or that motion that's happening? Like, that's the part of production that I love, where I combine sort of the classical idea within my now idea of sound, like even in synthesizers or synthesis or any of that stuff.
I love that. So that's something that I know, remember picking up on listening to classical arrangements, even in big band arrangements, same thing, anything with a big orchestra, you have this opportunity for a particular melody to be a combination of instruments, and it can be soft and mysterious, or it can be hard and in your face. And I started thinking about how do you figure that stuff out? A composer, And I realized that there's just an overtone quality to instruments.
Mm-hmm.
Some instruments are very pure and don't have the same overtones, I guess, I don't know how else to say it, on the sound like others do, like a brass instrument, a trumpet or something that's got a lot of, I think of it as kind of a square wave almost, And so I imagine that that's part of that. Like with the synth, you just take one synth and you sort of blend in some overtones and put some filters on it. And maybe that's where your sound comes from. With a guitar, the more you distort it, the more you begin to bring in those overtones and you get more mid-range and highs out of it and everything. And with an orchestra, you literally arrange to add other instruments to it too, which is pretty cool.
Yeah.
So thanks for that history lesson on Ravel. That was very cool. All right, well, so let's jump back on track here. I like to ask our guests to share an inspirational quote as we get into the podcast. Is there anything you want to share that's kind of gets us excited about hitting the studio?
Yeah, I don't know if this is like a quote, but this is more something that I came up with. I feel like turn your weakness into a strength has always been my personal philosophy.
Thank God. For me, that is.
Yeah, well, I mean, in the sense of like, for instance, when I first started producing, and I still do this, I didn't have money to buy fancy gear. And also I didn't have a reference on what fancy gear really sounded like when you first start doing things. So I would have like this terrible microphone and a terrible preamp, or not even a preamp, really, just like straight into my device. And so for certain people, that's a weakness, how you say like, well, I wish I could buy this and I wish I could buy that. But that's actually your strength, because that's something that the person who has all the stuff will never think about, how to use that kind of bad microphone on the guitar a certain way where it creates this really interesting sound. Or maybe it has like a certain crackle or buzz to it that actually works really well with like a guitar amp. Or like that is the stuff that I love. And even in live, I feel like I apply that in everything. When there's a part of me personally that I see myself as I consider as a weakness, I try to think about how it's actually my strength. So I feel like in production, it's a very real thought that I constantly think about.
I think it's very insightful. So I was just trying to remember, I was watching something with my daughter and somebody was talking about the creative process. I forgot what it was. Sorry about that. But the person pointed out once again that creativity comes from defining the limitations. You have to first define what your limitations are before you can get creative. And many people have talked about that, about making records. People have been on the podcast talking about that. I've heard people talk about, we decided that we're only going to use 8 tracks or something. I know that when we recorded in the studio with an 8-track 1-inch tape machine, I think it was 1-inch or half-inch, that limitation alone just forced us to be really interesting and creative with what we did. And it was really fun. And I've mentioned this probably before on the podcast too, but when I was in architecture school and we studied the design of the Bauhaus School of Design, there was this understanding that if you're going to make a brilliant poster, first you have to know what the boundaries are of the poster design, and then you can figure out how to put everything on there and push all those boundaries and really make it cool. And so hearing you talk about that, it's just that reminder that the creative process, it's so important to know those boundaries before you can get creative. And, maybe we don't talk about this so much, but I think we're aware of it, this idea of, endless takes, endless choices, endless plugins. It really is a lack of boundaries on our creativity. And I think that's why we get frustrated with it. Why, endless time frame on a record. That's one of the reasons why it gets so hard to do, is because I think it's because we're removing those boundaries. Sorry, I did a lot of talking there, but jump back in. Tell us more things that come to mind for you about where boundaries come into your production. Examples or stories of that.
Well, time, like you said, a deadline, sometimes there's no deadline. I always make sure that there's a deadline. Also because I do like 700 projects at the same time. So I can't have 700 things last forever.
That's a lot of projects.
Well, I mean, that's like a very over-exaggerated number. But like, I feel like having a deadline is essential for me to produce. Like, because it needs to be done at this time. So, I mean, like opening a session and like knowing what I want to do with it, and then how many times more am I going to open it and like give into my idea of perfectionism, and like when is something really perfect for my ears versus somebody else's ears? Like time is the one that clips that off. It's like I can't keep being a perfectionist 5 times over if I have to deliver this tomorrow. And it also kind of creates this idea where you don't sit around and like putz away your time. You know, it's like, oh, maybe I should like play with this like one sound that I know nobody's ever going to hear, but I hear it constantly because I'm a perfectionist. Like, how long am I really going to focus on this little sound thingy if it has to be done tomorrow? So deadlines, timing, all that stuff is important to me. What
about some limitations in terms of tools? How do you limit yourself in terms of the tools that you get to use?
Well, personally, I have very limited tools.
Okay, there you go. Just start out that way.
Yeah. Since I have a traveling sort of kid, and I travel a lot, like I usually just bring one microphone. I have just what I have on my hard drive, and whatever is in the room that I'm in. So that's already enough. Like that's a limitation right there. Like I love, like if I don't have a drum kit, but I want to have the idea of a acoustic element. Like I really don't want everything to come out of the box. Like I make an effort to just use as many sort of real sounds, even though they're not like a table, you know, like, or ticking with my pencils against, or drumsticks against each other, or like doing some weird beatboxing thing, or like something weird, but I know it came through a mic, and there's another element to the in the box situation.
Yeah.
Just to create a different space and atmosphere.
Well, when you record things with the mic and you play something acoustically, it might seem simple when you think about it, but the truth is there's so many millions of little variations in an actual acoustic sound that it's a great way to get things interesting, you know?
Yes, absolutely.
All right, so let's see. How about sharing a story of an important failure for you? Anything in making music that was a real like failure, but became a great learning experience?
Yes, I actually had one recently that I really sort of was upset with myself over.
It was coming on this podcast?
No, it was, okay, so I always do everything myself. Like that's kind of been sort of the way I work, is I know how I work fast, and I've been trying to hire people to come in and do certain elements of what I do and see how that works. So I've trained somebody to really sort of, you know, work on timing of instruments, tuning. And so I really trained them on how I would want to do it, bring them in on projects and stuff. And I always check everything because I'm really aware of the fact that, you know, like it's me, that I'm the person that's representing this project, so I want to make sure it's perfect, which is an important word in my life, I guess, because I feel like I've mentioned it like a million times at this point. But there was this one occasion where I was about to hit the road, and I was flying to Europe, and I was doing this big recording session 2 days before that, and everything needed to be delivered, and I didn't check the files, and I just still am upset about it because it was the only time, and this is like a phenomenal person that works with me a lot, the only time that they forgot to group the drums into the timing process, and they only timed the hi-hat and not the entire group. And I got the mix back, and I thought,
that sure sounds weird.
What's going on? And so I had to open up the original session with the files that he sent over and just download them all, check it out. I was like, oh, I totally get it. And it's really not upon that person. It's really upon me. So the learning thing, I guess, was just make sure you check everything, because everybody makes mistakes when you're tired. Like that is totally fine. But at the end of the day, I'm the responsible person here. So if something slips through my fingers, it's really my fault.
Yeah. And there's a lot of opportunity to get tired making records, especially when you're in the studio for 16 hours a day.
Yes. So I could have spent 2 more hours before I jumped on the plane, and it would have cost me some sleep, but those would have been very valuable hours.
Oh, but what precious sleep.
Yes.
You can always sleep on the plane, right?
That's true.
Well, that's good advice. And, you know, even for me, even literally just publishing this podcast every week, there are so many places to have errors. And I recently misspelled somebody's name, and I apologize to you. You know who you are. So I had tried to go back and correct it, and I'm still finding misspellings here and there. So it's frustrating. But it's just that, constantly checking. And I guess on a certain level, there's no way around it. There's we're always having to check stuff. I feel like, however, at the same time, the more we do the same thing over and over again, the better we get at catching those things and checking them. But
absolutely.
when we're always changing the game on ourselves, it's hard to check it. Or you just have to put in like tons and tons of time to methodically go through everything you do.
Yes.
You talk about lining drums up. When I was making records in, late 90s, we didn't have things like Beat Detective or Elastic Audio. And we were first learning the ability to do drum timing anyway. So what we would do is we would manually chop by hand every single drum beat on a whole song, start to finish, and then go through and quantize or manually snap them to the grid so that they were all lined up, and then manually go back through and crossfade every single one. And it would easily take, an 8 to 12 hour day of nothing but sitting there and chopping and chopping and chopping and doing all this stuff. And there was no feel to it either. It was like, robotics right on the grid.
Yeah.
But I'm glad we don't have to do that stuff anymore.
No, that sounds terrible.
We need to be pretty thorough.
Yeah. Wow.
All right, cool. So now how about, this is a kind of a weird question, but what about an aha moment for you? Anything where a story you want to share where everything just kind of clicked about maybe the studio process or the writing process or the production for you?
For me, the aha moments are the moments when you meet somebody you completely connect with as far as an artist. So that's not necessarily technical or like a tangible aha moment, but more of like our ideas of what we want to accomplish with this music is exactly the same. Like our writing process works a certain way. Our goals that we're going for are the same sort of goals. Like, I didn't realize how amazing that is until I finally found somebody that really works with. And I've always, developing artists is my passion. I love to develop artists. And I recently started a label for the purpose of putting out the artists that I'm developing, because I just wanted to create an opportunity for them to really sort of get out into the world and however I can help to create a faster highway for them to.
And this is LV Music?
Yes. But before I started the record label and before I sort of put those expectations to an artist of we're putting out this music and what are we going to do together, I often would just make a record or an EP with somebody and be like, here you go. And then, every process was great along the way. And then once you give the product to the artist and they have to do their job of putting it out into the world, suddenly there was a moment of disconnect. And so
I know that experience.
It's a very frustrating moment because you as a producer don't necessarily have the tools to help that artist, put their stuff out there. You're not necessarily
a label.
Yeah, the artist doesn't know what to do, or life happens and boyfriends, girlfriends, whatever happens in that person's life that prevents it from getting out there. So my aha moment was when all of that kind of lined up and it worked. It
worked because you created LV Music, or you saw it work and decided to create LV Music to repeat that process?
LV Music organically happened because me and an artist named Belmont, we were both on the exact same page. We both wanted to put the music out. So I just used my thinking head and just started reaching out to some people. He started getting a band together and it all just kind of happened. And through that, the label started happening and I could sign more artists onto it. And it just really organically happened. But that was totally aha.
It's great to hear you tell that story. So I specifically remember a record I did with an artist, and I did it here. And I really poured myself into the production. Mm-hmm. And it was also an opportunity for me to play a lot of instruments. Mm-hmm. And I sang all the background vocals and I really got to arrange. This is an artist that came in with a really simple blank slate for the songs. And they were unusual songs and they had some smart writing things to them, the quirky things and stuff like that I was really able to like you talked about as an arranger, kind of figure out how to arrange this into a band format and how to put it together and how to create something unique out of it, which was a lot of fun. And I was so proud of it at the end. And then the same thing. It's like, and then it went off with the artist and life happened and he, turned out to be more of a hobby than a career. And I just watched all of my work and my career path just kind of evaporate into nobody ever heard it.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that's a frustration in this process. So I think if you want to talk more about that, even I think that's great, because I bet there are a lot of people out there that either have experienced that, where they've really helped to create something, but then once it leaves the studio, it's out of your hands, and nothing happens with it, and it never comes back to, never comes back full circle necessarily to keep fueling the fire of your career. And then there are also people that maybe just aren't aware that they're about to embark on 20 years of that experience. So feel free to tell us more about what makes it work better instead of screwing up like that.
Well, I mean, I feel producing is also more than cashing a check. If somebody says, I want to pay you a certain amount per song, or I feel like I wouldn't just take the job because I want to get a check. I would take the job because I also believe in the project and I'm willing to make an investment. And sometimes you do things for free. I mean, a lot of times you do things for free because of the passion that you have for that particular project. And so I think you almost owe it to yourself, to you and the artist and everybody involved, to also inform yourself about the process after delivery. And which point in life do you refer to as delivery? Is it like printing the final mix, or is it putting it on Spotify, or is it helping with setting up a show for that artist, or is it going to a local radio station and asking for a DJ, seeing if they want to play it? Like, what is the point of delivery you're referring to as a producer? And I think nowadays that could be anywhere. And I think it's our responsibility, if we really want to grow in this industry, is to find more ways to get your own stuff out there, any way, shape, or form. Like, find a distributor, or if the artist doesn't want to put it out on Spotify, ask permission, see if it's cool if you can put it up, and see what happens, and all that kind of stuff. There's a million different ways to get it out there.
Yeah. Well, here's one that you may not know about. Rockstars, I've been mentioning this a bunch, and you'll probably hear me do it even more. Check out musiccoin.org. That's a brand new one. Musiccoin. That is a streaming site, and it's built on blockchain technology, and it has its own cryptocurrency, like a Bitcoin, that goes with it.
Oh, cool.
And if you post your music on there, right now I think it pays 14 cents for every listen.
Really?
Yeah. So,
wow.
But it's a Wild West kind of a thing.
Cool.
So.
But everything is the Wild West. I feel like the music industry is this giant pirate ship with a bunch of pirates who just have to kind of figure it out, Yeah. That's cool.
Is Johnny Depp on the ship? Is he
I hope so.
The head pirate? Jack Sparrow? Yeah, so let's keep talking about that though more. Describe more of what happens to the music after it leaves. So you talked about getting it in a few places, but what are some things in your mind? Where do you see as some potential goals for music to go such that the money finally arrives and flows back for that initial investment of recording in the first place and all that?
Well, the fastest one is streaming. So I feel anybody can start a TuneCore account or a 1RPM account and like put their music up, and through that TuneCore, whatever one you pick, it gets distributed through however many places they distribute through worldwide. So that's the easiest and fastest way, but it doesn't guarantee that people actually hear it. So how do you then create Facebook ads to lead back to the links, or find Spotify people that can help you connect with moderators, or find other artists to connect with and set up a show that have like a bigger following and see if they can advertise on their streaming or social media platforms.
And then if it's on the streaming platforms and people start listening to it, in your experience, do you see a paycheck for that?
Yes. Well, 1 million streams on Spotify is about $5,000. So even, I think the music industry is now becoming a thing where it's about the amount of stuff you have out there. So let's say you have 20 or 30 songs out there and they all have 100, 200,000 streams. That is generating a paycheck. And So not every song has to have 1 million streams for you to generate an income. Like you can have hundreds out there, like little sound bites or 1 minute cues, or however you put your music out there, the more money you make.
That's great. And then, so now I can't help, remembering that I've heard many stories of artists saying that they're not seeing the paychecks that they wanted from Spotify. What, in your experience, is that about?
Well, what
have you heard?
Publishing and master ownership are two separate things. So in publishing, it's a really hard thing to get paid, and especially if you're signed to a publisher when it comes to streaming. But when you own master rights, so when the artist owns the master, or you as a producer own a master, or you jointly own a master, that's where the money is. And the same thing is in sync licensing. If somebody licenses a song of yours in a film or in a TV show, you have your publishing money, and then the equal amount is a master money. So even if, that's, by the way, the sync thing is always a great way of income.
Right. Getting it placed in a film or a TV show.
But ownership of master is really important, or having points, or sometimes when you work with a record label, they're obviously not going to give you ownership of master because they control the master and it makes it easier for them to license them.
Right.
But you can ask for, instead of points, you can ask for a percentage on the income of the master, or there's different ways of sort of creating a business model that works for you as a producer.
And then, if you're talking to people who are independent musicians and they're putting their own music up on TuneCore, then you are not going to have to do any revenue share necessarily, but it may be harder to get 1 million listens on Spotify, for example, right?
Yeah, but then again, I think a couple of months ago, there was some old band somewhere, like an old rock band, who suddenly started getting all this attention for this one song, got millions and millions of streams, and it's just a bunch of older guys that just put their music out there. And so suddenly music is not necessarily age related or genre related, or, you can put something out and there is an opportunity for it to get discovered. Like, I think what the audience is looking for, or the listeners are looking for, is discovering something that no one has heard before.
Yeah.
The new A&R is the 14-year-old kid that's finding new stuff on Spotify.
That's interesting. It used to be that you were trying to sign the 14-year-old kid. Now the 14-year-old kid is the A&R.
Yeah, and that kid doesn't really care what that person looks like necessarily, or if it's done in a garage or in a $1 million studio. He just loves it, or she just loves it, and starts sending it to their friends or puts it on their playlist, or I think that's such a cool thing about today.
All right. Well, I think that's really encouraging to you to hear you speak about putting music out there and getting it onto these streaming sites using TuneCore, 1RPM. That was the other one you mentioned too, and that's actually a tenable, feasible business model for putting your music career into. So that's great. Let's back up to the first stage. What about for engineers and producers in recording studios? Do you feel like there is an opportunity for them to collaborate as just a producer, maybe not a songwriter, with an artist and say, hey, let's work on something together? And then when it goes off and leaves me in the studio, this is an agreement that could make sense. What are some, what advice do you have for people in terms of, here's a simple agreement or a simple approach to how you could arrive at an agreement for how to participate in, mailbox money one day down the road?
Yeah. So I think the master ownership or percentage on the income on the master is the best way to go. So as a producer, you could say, I really believe in this project. I think it's phenomenal. I know, let me reduce my rate, but maybe we can figure out a way for me to get more in the back end if it does become successful, because I really believe in it and I could see it become successful. That's one way of doing that. And it's a great thing for the artist to, not necessarily have to pay a huge rate and feel like somebody's investing in them. It just gives like a little extra boost. And then if it does become successful, then just make sure you have everything in writing, of course. So that,
in my experience, that was always the big challenge. It seemed like it was a a big expense and a big complicated thing to try and get lawyers involved. Have you found that it's still that way, or has it gotten simpler? I mean, has it simplified in terms of coming up with master ownership contracts, for example?
I think it's everything that you want. Like if two people are aligned with their ideas at that particular moment in time, it's really easy to set up a legal document that's a 1-page or a 2-page sheet with just, specific language and making sure it's like you can have a lawyer draft up a generic form, just a 1-page or 2-page contract as a producer, and then adapt it as you see fit with each artist. But as long as you and the artist are on the same page, if you tell them it's like, hey, look, I know we've talked about this. Are you cool with just doing this on paper and making it into a real thing so we both feel invested? And it's like, we have this sort of like written down, and the artist, it would be strange if they would say like, I feel really that just seems weird to me, because you already discussed it. I think it's the way you approach it that makes it easier or not easier to do. If that makes any sense.
No, it does. It does. It's just good to hear you talking about it too, because I know you've got experience with it with your label as well. And I think it's encouraging for people to just hear the discussion of like how to approach something, what could happen when you're working on it, what can happen later, how to do all that stuff. And it's good to know that there's hope.
Yeah, there's always hope. I mean, music is something that people need. People will always need a producer. People will always need good songs. It's just, how do we get it to those people? And that's just a positive thing, and I think.
Well, let's talk about some production stuff here. What you talked about being really passionate about developing an artist. Talk about how you like to approach. What's your method for first working with an artist, finding a groove, digging in deeper, all that kind of stuff?
So for me, it always starts with the writing. I know it's not necessarily production, but I feel when I write with a person, I can sort of see where they are in their mind, like which choices they make writing wise, which subjects they pick, which melody lines they pick. And if I give them a couple of options, which one they pick out of those options, like it makes me get to know a person really fast. And through that writing process, I feel like I can kind of gauge their production interests. So since I have a lot of international artists, they come here for a week, maybe, or I go there for a week. We write a bunch of songs, get guitar vocals down, make sure that we all love these songs. And we don't necessarily get to the production process with the artist in the room. So it's that process of writing that makes me understand what it is that they would want. So then I take those guitar vocals or whatever back to my room and just really start sort of listening to what they told me their favorite artist is or their favorite song, sort of getting into that mindset and then just creating it. So I just, start playing a bunch of instruments, layering things. Is this an atmospheric project or is this more electronic? Are we going for more of a pop, straightforward direction? Are we going for something super indie?
And the artist is with you at this point too?
No, it's all just me.
Afterwards. Okay.
Yeah. And then I start shooting back my ideas like, hey, do you like this? Do you
They've
like
gone
this?
back over to,
wherever
Thailand or wherever they live at this point.
Yeah. And I just start shooting over ideas like, what do you think of this? And sometimes they're like, well, let me send you back an electric guitar part that I would really want to use on this. Or let me
Right, so it helps to collaborate with somebody who also has a Logic recording studio of their own.
Yeah, or just a friend that has one. But for instance, my artist in London, he just has like a Focusrite Pre and in his laptop, and he just records his electric guitar parts through Guitar Rig and sends it back. So he doesn't need any large things, like it's just really simple.
How long does a process like this maybe take? So you've spent a week together kind of recording these ideas, writing and capturing vocals, and then you're doing some follow-up stuff, and now you're emailing things back and forth. Is this sort of like might take a year to complete a record or a collection of songs? Or
the first song takes the longest because that's like the framework that defines everything. So the first song might take 2 months, something like that. And once that first song, everybody's like kind of happy, then the other songs that you've written are super let's follow that framework that we just created. And then it could just go really fast. Like sometimes I'll have something within 2-3 months, and we'll have like an EP that's kind of good to go. And sometimes the other person might have a longer process, but it doesn't have to take too long. I think it's just the first song that's rough.
Keep educating us a little bit on business model for something like this. So is this process of doing things with artists one where everybody's sort of working for free in collaborative context, but you just have an agreement about what will happen with this music later when it goes out there, and you have to have a really long-term vision. You have to be willing to wait for 5 years before the work you do today is finally showing the income? Or are there other ways to approach it that you want to tell people about?
That's a good question. I feel songwriting is always free. That's just your own time. And then to me, there's like a trial process. So I always invite artists out, like, hey, do you want to write together? Do you want to come to Nashville? Or maybe when I'm in London, we can do a write or something. And so that's just seeing if we like each other. It could very well be that after a week of writing with a person, we're both just like, ugh, terrible.
All they want to eat is pepperoni pizza every day, breakfast,
no more
lunch,
music.
and dinner.
And so, like in case that happens, we just wasted a week. It's cool. Like, that's just an initial investment. Once we feel like, okay, we really love this song. This is something different. Like, let's pursue this. I usually just kind of go through the first song, through the process of seeing how the artist and I work through the process. And once we both feel good, then I start talking about like, okay, how should we pursue this? What do you envision for yourself? Like, do you see yourself signed to a major label? Should we just make something that fits that and then start shopping it? Or should we put it out independently? What is your vision for this? For me, if an artist doesn't have a vision, I will say, I don't want to work on this project.
Nice.
Because, there's no point to it. Like, I'm a growing producer. Yeah, I feel like my main aim as a producer right now is to get out there and be heard and build my database of stuff that I'm proud of and getting asked to do that kind of stuff. Like I don't want to work on things that will never see the light of day because it will not reflect anything for me in the future.
Right.
That might sound really harsh, but
no, well, you're kind of a badass.
Oh, thanks.
So yeah, okay. So let's say you guys have got a good thing going. There's a little bit of a vision, and it's like, all right, well, we should get a band into the studio and record this with the band. And it seems like at that point, there's an opportunity to need to spend some money to make this record. What are some situations that you've seen work in the past, or what advice do you want to give for how do we approach the next question of we need money to do the next thing?
So every example is different, but let's say the last one I had was there was a manager from Scotland who was managing this really young rock indie band, and they asked me to sort of reproduce a track of theirs. They really liked it. He flew with the lead singer to Nashville. We took a week of writing and seeing if we liked each other, the whole process. We really liked the songs that came out of it. And so the manager decided to invest in flying me to Scotland and working with this band personally, taking some studio time. So that was a manager investing in expenses.
Right. That flight alone probably was bigger than my first record budget with my band. But of course, we're talking about 25 years ago.
And it was more valuable at that time, that amount of money.
And our budget was only $300, so there's not much to talk about there.
But limitations are strengths.
That's right. That's right. We put out an entire, for a 90-minute 30-song cassette that got a bunch of press attention and everything. We almost got signed off it, but we didn't.
Songs.
So that's old news.
That's intense.
I digress.
Anyway, so Scotland, I flew to Scotland. I try that my expenses are paid, but I don't necessarily charge for the process, because that's where the investment aspect comes in. It's like, okay, if we are pursuing this and I help you put this out, or I want a part of the back end, I invest my time. So I see my time as the negotiable situation, time versus money. I rather not try to, I pay some plane tickets back and forth if I'm investing in an artist too, but I initially want to see a bit of an investment on their end too. If that helped anything with the...
Yeah, no, I think those are good answers. And I know it's a hard question to answer. You get lost in details pretty quickly. But I imagine it's a reminder that in order to have that flexibility, it's important for, to keep your overhead minimal too, and maybe have a simple portable studio and not a whole lot of expenses. And, different people maybe be in different situations. For some people, if you're married with kids, that's maybe not the same chapter as when you're, at a younger age in your life, and it's easier to have that flexibility. I know it certainly was for me. I used to travel all over the place and go make records everywhere. And it was all about, time first. But I think a real struggle for me was sorting out that agreement and that what happens later and stuff. And that can be a real challenge. And sometimes it's also very challenging to sort out the agreement and stay in a powerful creative place, 16-hour days in the studio and talking about money and contracts. They have to be separate conversations. And that's a real challenge sometimes.
Yeah, I do feel like the idea of you investing if the artist gets the notion that you are as invested as they are, that conversation sometimes becomes easier.
That's good advice.
Because if they are calling you like, I'm going to pay you, I'm going to rent your studio, I'm going to use you as my engineer and pay you for that, it's a much harder conversation because they never initially thought of you as a person who was investing. It was them investing in themselves, and you were an expense in that process.
Right.
So you as a producer have to choose when do I just want to be part of the expense on the artist's end and just do this work because I have a studio and I have lights to turn on, and when do I believe in this artist and start the conversations like, hey, I know you're investing, you're like spending money on me, but maybe we can change this relationship into a mutual investment. And, that makes it a different conversation.
Yeah, I've done records at times where an artist has come to start making the record with me, and then that budget didn't make it as far as they hoped. And then I put in more time, and then I took a look at, it was time to sort of like settle up or figure out a plan. And when I crunched the numbers, I was like, oh, when you look at it from this perspective, I'm actually a 50% investor in this record by this point,
Yeah.
And, but it took sitting down and really figuring it out and being able to word it like that. In that case, I didn't want to become a 50% investor, but it sure made it a lot easier to send another invoice for the additional time and just let them. And in this case, it was an artist that took the record and decided they wanted to go do something else anyway. So, it's probably good that way.
Different scenarios all around. I mean, I know I did projects where if I crunched the time versus income, I made maybe like 50 cents an hour, or just you did for free and nothing happened. But like sometimes you just spent way more time than you think you would on a project because the artist is super picky, or they keep changing direction, or they don't have a direction, or you have to be able to set like your boundary. But I only know that because I feel like I've gone through all the like options of not setting boundaries. So now this is my boundary. I have agreements, contracts.
How long, what's the span of your career as you describe it now?
It's about 12 years.
12 years of making records like this. Yeah, that'll get you through a lot of experiences.
Yes.
Especially if you're busy,
Yeah, I mean, it started with like film scoring, so it's a whole different agreement situation. But then I think I've seen every scenario from songwriter to composer to arranger to everything that could possibly happen. So
that's very cool. Well, let's take a break for a minute. We'll come back in for the jam session. Rockstar, as a reminder, you can click through on your mobile listening device, or if you're listening in iTunes on your computer, in the show notes, you should see a link straight to the blog post, and that'll give you more information. We'll include a link to Femke's SoundCloud player, and you can check out all her productions there. Really cool pop stuff. A lot of what I heard initially was like great pop music. I think it's far more expansive than that. You've done film soundtracks and TV soundtracks and stuff like that too. So maybe we can get some of those links in there as well.
Yeah.
And we'll see you in just a sec for the jam session. Roswell Pro Audio brings you microphone design that is out of this world. Endorsed by a growing list of artists and producers like Phil Collen of Def Leppard, Ross Hogarth, who's recorded Van Halen, Ziggy Marley, and the Doobie Brothers, and Super Dupes, working with Drake, Mary J. Blige, and Eminem. These are all rock stars that have discovered just how great Roswell microphones sound. Check out the Mini K47, which uses a capsule modeled on the one in the vintage U47 at a street price of only $299. or the beautiful Delphos condenser microphone with a capsule tuned like the vintage U67 with great clarity and far lower noise at a street price of only $8.99. In fact, you are hearing my voice right now on the beautiful Delphos microphone. These mics are carefully crafted by hand and immediately feel good even before you plug them in and hear how great they sound. These are well-built microphones that will last you and your studio a lifetime of great recording. Check out more audio examples of these awesome mics at roswellproaudio.com. Hey Rockstars, we're back. We're going to jump into the jam session. My guest today is Femke Weidema. And Femke, are you ready to jam?
Yes, I'm
All right,
ready.
cool. So when you started out in recording, what was holding you back?
Oh gosh. I guess my lack of knowledge. Because I mean, that's a hard one because I always feel like that's also been kind of cool because I've been just trying things. But there was a time when I was like super focused on how to do everything right. And so how do I use an EQ? How do you use a compressor? And I was not trusting my ears as much as I was thinking on how to do it right.
Right.
Yeah. And so I was really focused on like, okay, is it possible if I do this plugin first and then this plugin and this is that correct in the idea of like schooling instead of listening to it and thinking that sounds actually really cool because it's like totally over compressing, but it's kind of awesome, you know?
Yeah, I guarantee you everybody who's listening to this goes through that same experience. Yeah. Me too. I look at how many slots there are for plugins. What is it, 10 now in Pro Tools? And then I'm asking myself, like, is it okay to use all 10 slots for plugins or is that bad or good or what, you know?
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, I think that it's cool. You know, you talk about using Logic Pro 10, and that is also a really good tool for learning and composing in because they simplify it. You can get complex with it, but they also simplify things to keep it really easy to just not have to think about it too hard.
Yes.
Which is great.
Yes.
I don't like thinking too hard.
I know, me neither. I just like to do.
Not when it's time to jam. When it's time to jam, just stop thinking.
Just go.
Thinking screws up the jam every time. All right, now how about sharing with us some of the best advice that you received?
That I received.
Did you have any good advice from Hans Zimmer?
No, like because I saw that question, I was thinking about like the best advice, and actually that was the one where I was like, oh, I don't actually know if I got it.
Well, let's see. How about just describing, tell us some stories about some of your mentors.
Yes. So I've been very lucky with meeting mentors and people that I really sort of vibed with and worked for. One of my mentors was a guy named Don Grusin, who's a piano player. And he, at the time, was living in LA, and he now lives in Colorado. And he just really, he's a fantastic composer, like just a phenomenal piano player. And I remember he would play these shows and there was Abe Laboriel on bass and just phenomenal musicians together. And that was just...
Wait, there was what kind of bass?
Abe Laboriel is like a...
Abe Laboriel?
Yeah,
he's a great bass player.
Okay. All these jazz musicians. And just being in a room with those people was always so inspiring because I would just be so aware of the fact that I could never play that. But it was like you would hear these sounds and these chords that you would never think of and these progressions. And so... that was great. And also the thing I love about him is that he always tries something new. He's not just a jazz pianist. Although he tours with his brother, they do a piano duet thing. He scored films and TV shows. I think he played piano with Herbie Hancock for a little while on tour. I mean, he started an educational program at a university to combine music and environmental issues, like just really great entrepreneurial mind. So that was really great.
So what do you think it was about him? Maybe he didn't give you the advice, but what would you interpret about him that allowed him to accomplish all these wonderful things and not sort of disappear into obscurity?
Just to kind of keep doing. He was always doing something. He was always creating something, being excited about something, looking for new artists. People would send him CDs of like cool Brazilian singers and he would just get all into like Brazilian music, and he would know this person in Brazil and would call them and talk about like we should collaborate on something and then actually go do it. Like he just did all these really great things, and was never sort of discouraged or. Now he was older when I met, I think in his 60s, and still just so intensely active and wanting to be present. And so I always feel it's really important for me to never sort of take everything for granted and just kind of do the same thing, but always kind of look around and think of other things that I could do and how can I better myself and how can I expand and how can I keep learning. I feel like that was definitely, as a mentor, he taught me that.
Well, that makes me feel better about all my scattered interests. So, and I was going to say, it sounds like you adopted that kind of mindset, you know, with this world travel that you're doing and creating music with people all over the place. So very cool.
Thank you.
Now, how about sharing a recording tip, hack, or secret sauce, something that the rock stars could use on their next session today in their studio?
Okay. Like I said, the Ravel thing going back, like I love making sounds. Like one of my favorite things is just to kind of start making a synth from a sine wave and like adding a bunch of plugins to it and creating something that's completely sounds like it's coming from another world. I always think there's this mixing book. I can't remember what it's called, but it makes mixing look like little sort of spheres. Have you seen this book?
The chart with like the bubbles and things on it.
Yeah. For some reason, I love that idea of like, where do I place this sound? Like, how large is this sound going to be? Is it going to be in the back of the room? Like, where in the room am I? What kind of room is this? Like, I love that sort of idea in production.
It's funny because they must have made those charts for you, because I also love the idea about thinking about the space, but I hated those charts with the bubbles on them.
Really?
They made me so frustrated whenever
What
I
if you
saw
can
them.
make your own bubbles?
That's true. I don't think I tried to make my own bubbles.
See, I think that's what I love is I don't necessarily see it as a mixing advice as much as a production advice. It's like
it's bubble advice.
Yeah, like where is my bubble? What bubble is this sound?
See, now that's a lyric we need to remember. Where is my bubble?
Yes.
All right. So great tip. And, you know, I guess the tip is kind of to create spaces around sounds and visualize how you're placing it.
Yes.
I actually remember one of the first mixes I did where I really thought about that and paid attention. It didn't turn out to be one of my best mixes, but I learned a lot. And I was mixing on a studio for a friend. I was mixing one of his songs. And I was just using, you know, they had a number of different little outboard, like lexicon reverb units. And I just went through the process of trying to add different reverbs to things so that it really sat it forward or back in the mix. And that was just, I remember that as an experience where I was first noticing, it's like, oh, is this instrument up front? Is it, maybe it doesn't need to be up front. Maybe it can be in the back. Maybe it doesn't. Maybe it doesn't even need to be the best sound. Maybe it can be a little bit buried in the reverb, you know, just to kind of push it back in the production.
Yeah.
So good. I like that. All right. So how about a favorite hardware tool? Something physical that you like to have on recording sessions?
I have a DMP 1073, which is my favorite preamp. Just because it's, I don't know, it just really sounds great.
Would you say it's the DMP?
Yeah, DMP 1073.
What is DMP for again? I apologize for being dumb.
I actually don't know what it stands.
What's the brand on that one? That is, okay. Well, somebody listening knows, and make sure you comment and tell everybody else. All right. The 1073 is an absolutely wonderful mic pre.
Yes.
I've had the pleasure of working with a band that had a BCM 10 in the studio. So we were able to do, when I was talking, in fact, about the 1-inch 8-track stuff we did demos where all we had was the 1-inch 8-track and a BCM 10 console that was just loaded with, I guess, was it 12 or 16? No, 10, sorry. It was 10 BCM 1073 mic pre's in it, the Neves. And man, did it sound good.
Yeah, I really like it. It's awesome.
Really incredible sound. So very cool. All right. Have you found anything that helps you emulate that 1073 sound in case somebody doesn't quite have the budget for that yet?
The Apollo has the bundles. What are those? What is that brand again? You know,
Universal Audio.
Yeah, they have the 1073. You can add the Neve one that you can just add to the channel as a channel strip, to your input, which
And it gives it some of that sound.
Yeah, it gives it a little bit like
okay,
that.
Cool. Yeah. The Apollo gets recommended quite a lot on the podcast. I don't have any universal audio yet. I would love to. And I know that all the plugins they make are just great.
Yes, absolutely.
Simple as that.
Yes.
They're all just great. And they really, really, really do sound about as close to the real thing as you can get, which is cool. All right. So now how about, well, that was my next question was a software tool. Any other software tools you want to talk about?
Sound Toys bundle.
Okay. Tell us about Sound Toys. How do you use it?
Sound Toys. Well, I use it as a way of creating sound. So I love the Echo Boy or the what's that? The Spinal Tap. Not
the Crystallizer or something
Crystallizer.
like that?
Yeah. The whole bundle just for me.
The Phase Mistress, isn't that one of them?
There's like so many amazing ones, but the thing I love is like, let's say you play guitar, you have just one guitar note. I love doing like, let's reverse it, throw it through a giant, massive reverb chain, reverse it back in, like what all those things. And so I feel like the Sound Toys bundle really makes me experiment with that stuff. And
especially since they built the rack too, where you can just load a bunch of stuff up and get this crazy thing going.
Yeah, get something that just keeps, like if you, there's this infinite reverb setting, and then you put a crystallizer on it, which creates this crazy thing that keeps going. Chop it off in pieces, tune it, time it, like whatever it is that you want to do with it. You can create an instrument out of that sound.
Yeah, that's cool.
Put it back on your keyboard, play with it. Just create something otherworldly or, accent.
I like that stuff. So I know that for me, I have to go into experimentation mode a bit with that. Sometimes I need to dedicate time to just playing around with stuff and then find a good way to capture it. What are some ways that you allow yourself to experiment with plugins and sounds like that, but then capture it and keep it so that you don't move on past it with, 10 more changes and tweaks and then you've lost that sound? Do you have a way that you capture a good idea?
I usually know what I'm going for, and I'm giving myself a certain amount of time to get to that point. And if I don't reach it within like 15 minutes, I move on to the next thing. Because experimenting could be you can do a giant chain in Sound Toys and reverse it, throw it back around and cut it up. And what you actually needed to do was put that sound through a guitar rig and add some other effects to it. So I feel like in the process of experimenting, I'm realizing if that's the best way to go for this thing that I have in mind. And if not, I just have to cut it off, because otherwise I just get lost in the world of like, ooh, what is this?
Right, yeah. Which is a fun world to be lost in. But before you know it, it's dinner break and you didn't get anything done.
Or you don't have dinner and breakfast and lunch and you just sit there like getting lost in
tweaking
your computer.
Out on it. All right. So now how about an organizational online resource? Anything that you use or advice you want to give to help us all kind of keep our shit together?
I use in Google the Excel sheets for almost everything, making lists, reminding that I send an email and I have to like remind myself, like send a reminder email on that email 3 days later. Like
let's get granular with that, because I think that's a great tip, and I think that's one of the hard things to do, or hardest thing to do is is following up with things, coming back later and remembering where you left off. How do you use that to remind you to send an email later?
Since I have all these files, I look at them every day. So I just have a list of things that I have to, like every morning when I kind of open my computer and I have like my coffee and I have an hour before people come in, I go through my list and I remind myself of what I had to do. So there's like my email checkup list. There is my unfinished production list. There's my when is the deadline list. Like, so I just kind of look through them and cross off what I did yesterday. You
just kind of write them all in a spreadsheet so you can just check them off as they go.
Yes.
Okay, cool. All right, that's good. And then what if do you have a way to remind yourself to send an email to somebody next month?
Yeah, Google Calendar. My Google Calendar is this giant, like every day has like 10 different tasks of things that I have to accomplish. And so I just put in like sign up for this thing on February 1st, email this person. I told them I would call them this date. So a day before the day I was supposed to call back, email, like putting it in the Google Calendar.
Should we be transparent about our Google Calendar fail today? Should we let the rock stars know?
Yes.
So what happened? What did we do today? That we need to tell everybody about?
I think what happened, I was in LA when we set up this appointment. And so LA is 2 hours back from here. So I think the appointment was from 3 to 5, but I think because I was in LA, when I went back to Nashville, it turned it from 1 to 3. So I think that's what happened. But you had another theory.
Or it happened on my end too. But I think the takeaway is rock stars, be aware that when you schedule something, calendar's great and you can do a lot of stuff with it. But when you schedule with somebody who's in another time zone, and then that person, one of you travels to a different time zone, because I might have been in New York on East Coast when we scheduled this too at that time.
That's true.
That sometimes the calendar doesn't shift the time zone, and sometimes it does when you don't want it to.
Yeah.
So that's something to just watch out for.
Yes.
I think there's a setting in there that allows you to say, don't follow the time zone or do follow the time zone.
Yeah, I feel like I have to go find that setting now.
And I'm trying to think, is there ever a time where I want it to follow the time zone?
Probably not.
Have I ever scheduled anything where I'm like, I want this, it says 1 right now, but I want it to say 3 next week when it's time for that. I can't think of a reason for that.
No.
So, there you go. All right. A little bit of inside advice there. Now, last 2 questions are both hypothetical. You're going to love this one because it's totally you. And usually I say, imagine that you had to start all over in a strange town, and you needed a simple setup to record with. You needed to find people to make music with, and then you needed to figure out how to make ends meet so that you could survive while you're doing all this. I feel like at least 2 of those you're always doing anyway, and you're kind of doing that with Make Ends Meet. How would you like to answer this question? What's a simple setup to you, for portable?
Yeah, I have a flight case, and in the flight case goes keyboard, mouse, Apollo, my laptop, a little MIDI keyboard, my microphone, it's like a U87, cables, adapters for other countries. I learned that one. It's really important. So that's and then I have all my hard drives in there. So it's the flight case is made to fit all those things. And I can check it in the bottom
And you get
of
something
plane.
like that custom made once you know what your setup is going to be.
Yeah. And one thing I learned is that I had one model too large to check in the overhead, which was a bummer. So I got the one that you have to put down in the plane. So when you go international, that's $100 extra. I learned that one the hard way.
And would it be possible for you to shrink it for an overhead, or is it pretty much it needs to be big?
I probably would have had to leave something out, but like the keyboard or some, like some larger thing. But I guess I could have put that in my backpack.
Maybe the sitar could have stayed home or something
Yes.
like that.
But yeah, so portable, that's my easiest portable kit. It works everywhere with everything in any room.
And it's a laptop inside?
Yeah, laptop. I used to have a Mac Mini because it was cheaper and I had it totally decked out with like all the RAMs and all the things that were important, but it was just hard to, then you also need to have a computer screen wherever you go, and that was kind of complicated.
We haven't figured out how to do that Star Wars holographic projection in front of you.
I know, that would have been so nice. And so yeah, that's the portable kit. And then the other question was how to find musicians, right? I guess I would just go to the local music school or to a bar or a coffee shop.
Yeah.
And then how to find a way to survive. Apart from networking, one thing, there's really no shame in having a job on the side. There's people who are so proud and I want to make money with music and I want to make my living with music. But honestly, like if you work in a coffee shop and like you can pay your rent and you can have a decent life, because there's nothing worse that kills creativity than the fear of not being able to pay the rent next month.
Right.
It's a terrible feeling.
Yeah.
So whatever you need to do to just secure yourself, like the base part of living. So when you are creative, you can fully be creative. Don't feel guilty about any of that, because that just ends the process.
Well, it's good advice. And it seems like, as you described it, the real driving factor that sees a vision through with music is just the drive and the vision. Mm-hmm. It's not the other stuff.
Absolutely.
Like if you got enough drive and vision, you're going to push through all the other limitations.
Yeah. And I also feel like attracts like you'll meet, if you are driven and you have a passion, you'll meet people wherever you go, next to you in the plane or in the train, or like there's people like you everywhere, and somehow it always connects.
Especially in Europe too. I remember when I was backpacking in Europe, it was so easy to meet people.
Yeah, it really is.
You meet somebody on the train, next thing you know, they're inviting you over to their family's dinner and stuff like that. Of course, I was 23, so it was a little different then.
But it'll still happen. Like
still happen, right? Well,
really
I got to do it.
that
I got to pack
way,
up my guitar and go over to Europe. That's great. Great advice. So the very last one, we're going to take the Wayback Studio machine. And I guess I don't know how way back we're going to go, 12 years at least. And you go back in time and you find young Femke, and you're going to tap yourself on the shoulder. You turn around and you say, oh my gosh, what are you doing here? And you say, well, I've come back to give you this one bit of advice. Here's the single most important thing you need to know to be a rock star of the studio yourself one day. What advice would you go back and give yourself?
I think it would be, don't be afraid. Yes, that would be it.
Don't be afraid. What do you feel like were some of the things you remember being afraid of?
Well, I was always, everything, like, am I good enough? Like, do I live up to everybody's expectation? Do I, I don't know how this machine works. Does it make me look stupid? Like, all these things, like, they're just
The answer is
trivial.
yes. All the machines make all of us look stupid all the time.
It's like the fear is just such a useless emotion, but
Yeah.
it's very everybody has fears for everything.
I'm trying to think of fears. So one of the fears, of course, is people fears, like they're cooler than I am.
Yeah.
I'm going to be stupid if I go and try and interact with them. Fear of lyrics. I'm terrified of writing lyrics. That's why I'm making you do all the talking on this podcast. Gosh, what are some other fears? Certainly the fear of money. That's always something that just hangs over, and it could be a real challenge. I found that after doing independent production as self-employed for years, you become accustomed, almost like you don't get seasick anymore. It's like, you're like, yeah, it'll be all right. I guess it'll work out,
Yeah.
Whereas maybe at first it was like, oh my God, how's this going to work?
Yeah.
So that changes a little bit. Although also when I was younger, it was also easier to just go like, yeah, I got $200. Yeah, let's go hop in a car and take, hit the road for 2 weeks. That's enough. Yeah.
That's true.
That'll cover my rent of $50 this month.
Yeah. Life changed. But yeah, I feel like fear is such a negative emotion. It holds you back so much. And at the same time, it's also the thing that because you were afraid, you now know that you shouldn't be. So I guess I wouldn't have learned that lesson otherwise, but.
All right, let's own up. What are we afraid of now?
Well, do you know that feeling when you start a new project and you're like wondering how you ever did this in the first place?
Yeah.
So that is like it. Every time I open a project that I'm working on and it's from the beginning, and I suddenly feel the largeness of it or the gravity of it, I'm thinking like, how do I get myself here? Why did they ask me? Like, am I good enough to do this? There's like this like train of thought I go through.
Yeah.
Did I like act my way through this process to earn this job?
How did I fool them?
Yeah. How did I, like all that stuff. And then I just have to do it. And just the moment I start working on something and find a cool sound, and I just lose all the internal fears go away, and I just kind of disappear in the sound.
Yeah.
I am good. Like it'll just,
So
the highway is made.
itself, right?
Yeah.
Well, I was thinking about, I had a jam session with my friend DJ upstairs this morning before we did this interview. And it's the same thing. Sometimes you sit down and like, okay, we're going to play some music now. And if I think about it, I'm like, what are we going to do? But as soon as I just start letting my fingers move or whatever, and then it's like you discover the limitations. Now it's like, well, my fingers can only do this very well. And then you do that, and then all of a sudden the music just comes out. And and if you listen, then you can follow it, right?
Yes. I really feel like you just have to kind of do, it's like all the internal mind stuff and the stuff like contracts and all this stuff. You just find a way to like make it as easy as possible and figure it out and sit it somewhere on your Google Docs and all your worries and stuff and just go do.
Thank God for Google Docs.
I know.
I don't know how we did it without all that stuff
Pen and paper.
many years ago. Pen and paper, but you lose it.
I know, yeah.
The truth is I lose my Google Docs too. Sometimes it's hard to...
Wow.
Well, it's just hard to remember what was that thing called and where did you put it and how do you find it now. So
that's true.
Well, Femke, thank you so much for being on Recording Studio Rockstars. That was a pleasure. I didn't know we were going to talk about all that stuff, but it was really cool.
Yes, thank you so much for having me.
Yeah.
It was really cool.
Let the Rockstars know how they can find you and reach out to you. What if they've got the greatest next hit song they want to compose with you?
Well, send it send me an email, I guess. You can find me on my label website is thisislv.com. And then, so my name is Femke, so Femke. If you Google Femke in Nashville, it's like all my information comes up.
Weidema.
Well, yeah, I'm trying to leave the last name out of everything because it's always like such a, like if I have to spell my last name and just, but yeah, just find me anywhere, send me an email through the website or LinkedIn or Facebook or any of those things.
Okay, cool. Rock stars, thank you for listening and thank you for being here. Of course, I'm going to include links to what we're talking about in the show notes. We'll put Femke's music in there and you can check it out and include the links to her website and all that. And Femke, we'll see you around the studio.
Sounds great.
All right,
Thank you.
Cheers.
Bye.
Thanks so much for listening to Recording Studio Rockstars. If you enjoyed the show and want to help make it better, please leave a rating and review on iTunes to help reach more people. You can click directly over to iTunes or go to recordingstudiorockstars.com/review for an easy explanation. And if you want more free content, all you have to do is text RS Rockstars to 33444. Again, that's RS Rockstars to 33444, and I'll keep you in the loop with articles, videos, and podcast updates. And I'll let you know about any upcoming giveaway offers, all totally free. Thanks for listening. I'm Lid Shaw, and this is Recording Studio Rockstars. Now, go make great music.